On the morning of August 5th, a chilling message reverberated across the Crimean skies, not with words, but with explosions. Ukraine had just launched what may go down as one of its most devastating precision strikes in the ongoing war. Russian warplanes were not just targeted, they were forced to flee, triggering an unprecedented withdrawal of military aircraft from key Crimean bases. Crimea, once seen as a fortress, is now a battlefield in retreat. The attack came without warning, at least from Russia's perspective, but from the Ukrainian side, it was weeks in the making. According to military analysts, this was not a random assault. It was a synchronized, high-impact operation aimed at disrupting Russia's entire air power network across the peninsula. At the heart of this shockwave was Vardiska Air Base, a lesser-known but strategically vital site near Simferopol. In the early hours, the base was rocked by a series of drone and missile strikes that appeared to bypass conventional radar defenses entirely. Eyewitnesses reported flaming wreckage, aircraft engulfed in smoke, and hangars reduced to rubble. Satellite imagery analyzed hours later revealed the extent of destruction. At least 2 Su-34 bombers, 1 Su-30SM, and a fleet of Mi-8 helicopters were either damaged beyond repair or obliterated. The blast pattern suggests multiple precision-guided munitions, likely launched using a combination of long-range drones and standoff missiles, were employed. But the real blow wasn't just in the loss of equipment, it was in what came after. Within minutes of the strike, emergency alerts were triggered across 3 other air bases in Crimea: Belbek, Kacha, and Novo-Fedorivka. Air raid sirens howled, fuel trucks were seen rushing off runways, and in a move not seen since the early weeks of the war, Russian fighter jets were scrambled, not to intercept, but to evacuate. By midday, Ukrainian intelligence reported that dozens of aircraft had taken off and rerouted north toward Krasnodar and Rostov. These jets were not deploying for counteroffensives, they were fleeing. This was not a battle, this was a rout. Why now? Why this scale? According to sources close to Ukraine's military command, the strikes on Vardiska were just the first domino in a larger campaign, one designed to make Crimea untenable for Russian air operations. And it's working. In a rare admission, the Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed temporary repositioning of air assets, though they stopped short of calling it an evacuation. However, social media footage told a different story. Endless convoys of fuel tankers, support trucks, and anti-air systems moving away from the peninsula. Airfields that once buzzed with activity now stood eerily silent. But the chaos wasn't limited to military infrastructure. The Kerch Bridge, Russia's vital lifeline to Crimea, was immediately closed to civilian traffic. Panic spread faster than the flames. Dashcam videos showed thousands of vehicles gridlocked in both directions. The line of cars fleeing Crimea stretched over 30 kilometers, backed up all the way to the Taman Peninsula. At one point, manual security checks at the bridge caused delays of up to 7 hours. Even military personnel were seen arguing with security officials. The traffic freeze turned into a humanitarian chokehold, with families stranded in the heat and fuel running out on the roadside. Ukrainian officials claimed responsibility for the strikes, but offered no details. Instead, a cryptic statement from Ukraine's defense intelligence simply read, "Crimea is not safe for Russian aviation, nor for its occupiers." So what exactly happened? How did Ukraine pull this off? Military experts point to an evolution in Kyiv's operational doctrine. The strike was likely executed using a mix of AI-guided drones, EW-capable UAVs, and satellite-coordinated targeting, all built on months of signal interception and air pattern tracking. What makes this attack different is not just its scale, but its psychological impact. For years, Russia believed that Crimea was a fortress, protected by layers of S-400 systems, naval defenses, and electronic jamming. But Ukraine has rewritten the rules. This is asymmetric warfare, on steroids. The jets that took off on August 5th weren't going on missions, they were running away, and that alone speaks volumes. The panic is spreading. In Sevastopol, the de facto Naval Command Center, reports suggest that senior Black Sea Fleet officers have begun moving their families out of Crimea. Local telegram channels overflow with posts warning of imminent escalation, while Russian military bloggers, once patriotic and bombastic, are now voicing open alarm about the collapse of air superiority in the south. And the evacuation isn't limited to military personnel. Data suggests that more than 80,000 civilians have left Crimea in the past 10 days alone, many of them Russians who settled there after 2014. Trains from Simferopol to mainland Russia are fully booked. Bus stations are overflowing. Panic has replaced propaganda. This is no longer a war of inches on the front lines. It's a war of doctrine, of infrastructure, and of morale. And Ukraine has made it clear. Crimea is no longer a sanctuary. It is a target. The attack on Vardiska was not just a tactical operation. It was a psychological earthquake, one whose tremors continue to fracture Russian control over the peninsula. Within 24 hours, Russian state media scrambled to downplay the scale of the assault. The Ministry of Defense issued a short statement claiming minor fire damage and no casualties. But satellite data, leaked footage, and eyewitness reports told another story. Hangars in ruins, runways cracked, and air traffic halted. The true cost wasn't just the warplanes left behind, it was the collapse of Russian confidence. Just hours after the strike, Ukraine followed up with another blow. A wave of long-range drones targeted logistical depots near Jankoy and a radar relay station outside Yevpatoria. Fireballs lit the night sky. Russian radar coverage went dark in the northwest. And then came the real panic. Rumors of a ground incursion spread like wildfire. They weren't true, but they didn't need to be. The panic became the weapon. The next morning, Russian families living in Crimea woke up to uncertainty and silence. Schools were shut down. Civil defense sirens were tested across major cities. Telegram groups flooded with anonymous messages warning of more strikes to come. And most notably, Russian military bases began issuing internal evacuation notices, not just for personnel, but for their families. Ukraine hadn't just struck aircraft. It had struck at the roots, the false sense of safety Russia had built over Crimea for over a decade. According to the partisan movement Atesh, at least 40% of Black Sea Fleet officers had relocated their families off the peninsula by early August. Evacuation orders were said to prioritize officers, air defense technicians, and port logistics workers, along with children and the elderly. This wasn't just a retreat, it was a retreat in stages, silent, scattered, and urgent. By August 6th, the Kerch Bridge remained closed to regular civilian traffic. Russian forces claimed it was due to security protocol, but dashcam footage and roadside interviews revealed a different story. Entire families, including active-duty soldiers, were caught in 14-hour queues, some abandoning vehicles to try crossing on foot. Railways into mainland Russia were overwhelmed. Ukrainian sources noted that extra Il-76 cargo flights were being used, not to deliver supplies, but to airlift personnel and families back to the Russian Federation. Others waited desperately full, or limited ferry services out of the peninsula. But there's a bigger problem. Crimea is a trap, and now the exits are closing. Since Ukraine's successful strikes in 2024, the rail section of the Kerch Bridge has operated under restricted capacity, just 2 trains per hour, down from a wartime peak of 6. That's only 4,000 passengers a day, far too little for the mass exodus now underway. Civilian air travel? Non-existent. After Ukraine's cruise missile strike on the Belbek airfield, no commercial flights have departed Crimea. Every remaining runway is either repurposed for defense or under threat of attack. Maritime escape? Also difficult. Under the Montreux Convention, Turkey has barred military ships from transiting the Bosphorus and Dardanelles since March 2022. That means Russian warships cannot enter or exit the Black Sea. Only civilian ferry routes remain, and even they face risk from naval drones and missile strikes. Put simply, Crimea is becoming an island under siege. Meanwhile, Ukraine isn't just targeting airfields, it's going after the digital nervous system of the Russian military. Reports confirm satellite uplink stations, electronic warfare outposts, and logistics servers have all been disrupted or compromised. The goal is clear: disable command, coordination, and communication. And it's working. Russian pilots are now flying blind over parts of Crimea. Some operations have been scaled back or suspended, and perhaps most importantly, Ukraine has demonstrated that nowhere on the peninsula is safe. Every missile strike is also a message. A message to Russian troops: you are being hunted. A message to Russian civilians: you are not welcome. A message to the world: this war is entering a new phase. In Simferopol, billboards erected by pro-Kremlin authorities calling Crimea "Forever Russia" have been quietly removed. Local authorities deny responsibility. Others claim it's to prevent morale loss, but whispers on the ground say, it all. Russia is preparing to lose Crimea. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has remained measured but firm. In a recent briefing, he said, "Crimea is not a rear base. It is a front line. Anyone who thinks otherwise has not been paying attention." This is the new face of modern war. Not columns of tanks, but precision drone swarms. Not endless trench battles, but digital sabotage. Not brute force, but psychological collapse. Ukraine is no longer waiting to defend. It is strategically eroding Russian dominance, piece by piece, runway by runway, family by family. The Russian military has plenty of weapons, but few answers, and as Ukraine continues to deploy low-cost, high-impact drone strikes, the cost of staying in Crimea for Russian troops, civilians, and the Kremlin is growing unbearably high. And that's the point. This isn't just about reclaiming land. It's about changing the doctrine of war. It's not about tanks versus tanks. It's about $5,000 drones dismantling $50 million warplanes. It's not about numbers. It's about nerve. And right now in Crimea, Russia is losing both. Crimea isn't just contested anymore. It's crumbling, under fire, under pressure, and under the weight of its own illusions. Ukraine has made its move, and the message is clear. Crimea is Ukraine.